Welcome to the Sensible Center podcast, where two middle-aged guys drunkenly talk politics and political reform. Grab an adult beverage and enjoy the show. Further information can be found at sensiblecenterpac.com. You can reach us at sensiblecenterpac@gmail.com or follow us on X at USASCPAC. Hey, Bob, how's it going?
Kevin, happy holidays.
Happy holidays. We'll jump right into this one because we got a lot to talk about. We have a returning champion guest, Dr. Tony Bryson. Who's
welcome back, Tony.
Hey,
expert
guys.
in media psychology. Yep, welcome back, Tony.
Thank you.
He's the author of The Trump Card. He researches the use of traditional media and new media and the efficacy of political messaging campaigns, which is a really good thing to talk about after this election. If you haven't, we had Tony on in December, I think, shortly after Kamala was ordained, but before the DNC. So we thought we'd have him back. If you haven't listened to the podcast in December, we kind of go over generally his fields of research, and it's a very interesting podcast. We split it up into two parts, so go back and listen to that. But tonight we'll be kind of talking about the general election and pretty much what happened, and get his insights on some of the messaging in the campaign and kind of what he learned from it, what we can glean from it, and kind of how to move forward. So, without further ado, welcome back, Tony. Let's just jump right into some of the things we want to talk about tonight.
Sounds good.
So last time we talked, it was right before the DNC. Kamala was selected, and I just read today that I guess Obama and Pelosi were not on board with Biden endorsing her, and kind of the way things went down there. I don't know if it's true or not, but I just read an article this afternoon. But anyways, she was kind of running on the vibes campaign, and watching the DNC, which I did. What did you think of the messaging at the DNC at the beginning of the campaign, and which seemed to focus more on, like I said, vibes, and she was using the term joy, they were using the term freedom, so they were trying to get sort of a higher level, not down into the details campaign. What did you think of that kind of initial start that they took?
I thought it was actually kind of refreshing. Some positive messaging was so different from the doom and gloom that was so pervasive during the campaign, especially the lead up to the DNC. The mood in around, Biden as a candidate was not positive. So
Right.
When they selected Harris and they had the DNC, I thought that the messaging was really good. It really brought people a little bit of hope for a short period of time. Unfortunately,
well, let's just bask in that a little while, because
Yeah,
I actually went to a campaign event in Wisconsin just before the convention with her and Walz in western Wisconsin, and it was that the crowd had that sense of relief, sort of, okay, this isn't going to be the train wreck that we've been foreseeing. We kind of knew Joe was maybe, the polls nobody wanted him to run, right? Or generally nobody wanted him to run except himself. So there was that sense of relief, and just staying kind of above it with the joy, I think, was a perfect way to start the campaign.
it was.
I agree with both of you on the whole vibes thing, and I think they kicked off strong with that. But I also think throughout the campaign, from really at that point, moving towards the end of it, is there should have been more substance. What are we going to do? Exactly how are we going to do it? Here's how we differ from the Biden campaign or the Biden administration, and that didn't happen. And that's the thing. I think that's a weak point that really needs to be addressed if you're the Democrat Party at this point. Is substance matters, and I think the Republicans tacked on that a little bit, saying they were able to project an image that she was stupid because she had no substance, and then an additional image that it was going to be more of the same because she didn't differentiate herself. And that to me is just, I don't know how any campaign really could have ignored that for 3 months and not course corrected, kind of. But I agree. The vibes, at first, you could see it in the polling. You could see it on the internet in random chat rooms that weren't even political. And you could kind of feel it when you were talking to conservatives about kind of how they felt about it. There was a little bit of nervousness.
Well, and again, I think that the positivity was something that we had really missed in our politics up to that point. So people took it as something very refreshing. The problem was that she quickly ceded control over the narrative and gave that back to Trump. You know, fear generates votes. So the Trump campaign leaned into what they do best, and the media followed that messaging and allowed that to overshadow any level of positivity. You could see it that some of the campaign events that they had, they tried to lean into the positivity, lean into the humor, try and make them fun. But when the Trump campaign managed to get into the media, it was just the same repetitive talking points that the Harris campaign refused to engage with and refused to counter.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tony. I think starting out running that different campaign, that gave a feeling of change, and they lost that fairly quickly. I mean, I disagree with Bob. I think within a short campaign, she should have stayed above it all and more mocked him and stayed above it and said, you know, we're going a different route. We're gonna bring this back to normalcy. And instead, like you said, I think she was dragged back down into it fairly quickly.
Well, I agree that what was said about her distancing herself from Biden. She should have.
Right.
She should have contrasted herself from Biden. She should have leaned into the differences between her and Biden and then told the story about her successes during her career, but most importantly, what she had done as VP in the White House, because she did have a number of successes. And she led the response on immigration, which was successful, as indicated, by dropping numbers at the border. She led the diplomatic effort with leadership in Central America. That's indicative by the comments from Mexico's president. She led the Central America Forward Project, which established over $5 billion in economic growth in Central America in the areas of textiles, agriculture, tech, telecommunications, and nonprofits, addressing a major piece of that illegal immigration flow towards the border. She gave some jobs and hope to the people in those Central American countries that helped stem the flow. And this is something that the Mexican president leaned into.
Did you feel that, Bob?
No.
Well, of course,
no, I did not. And the right
is why, right? Why?
The conservative media was very, very critical of her on the border, and you had the left-wing media saying she was never the border czar and she never had any responsibility, and that the conservative media was just pinning her that way to attack her.
Right.
So there was never a real message.
She should have countered that. She should have stood up for herself and said, listen, these are the facts. And then point to the comments from other leaders, point to the successes we had in Central America. Again, that's something that is well documented.
But here's the thing, too. I mean, it's the campaign on the left-wing media, and it happens on the right side as well. I'm not attacking. I'm just stating what I believe and I think is fact. The campaign and the Democrats write talking points, and they send them out to the left-wing media, and then the left-wing media parrots them. Same thing does happen on the right, but the campaign, if they had a different message, it would have been sent to the media. That was the campaign's message.
Let's get serious here for a second. If the DNC was feeding the left-wing talking points, they were feeding them a blank page, because the narrative throughout this entire election cycle was all about, let's talk about inflation. Let's talk about the economy. Let's talk about illegal immigration. Those were not the talking points coming from the Democrats. Far from it. And unfortunately for Harris, she should have leaned into those things. And she should have exposed the BS that was floating around in the media. The media were completely complicit in the result of what happened. I've never seen a more feckless group of people in my life than the media we have in this country and the performance that they put on during this past election cycle.
So you're saying the traditional media and the right-wing media were sticking to these talking points on inflation, immigration.
Yeah, they let Trump control the narrative. And it's hard not to let him control the narrative when he's out there saying so much crazy stuff that it's soundbite after soundbite after soundbite that you can go and throw on the broadcast and then spend a couple of minutes talking about, not fact checking it, not getting out in front of it and condemning it. You know, I'm sorry. They ate the cats and dogs, for the love of Christ. Come on, media. It's hilarious.
So did that work in his favor? I mean, crazily, I think that worked in his favor because it got him even more exposure and it focused attention on the immigration
issue. There was a story
which is
yesterday or the day before that woman that he was talking about was sentenced to like a year in jail just in the last week or so. Killing the cat.
Where did you read that?
All right, I'll have to find it. Give me a second. I'm looking at right now. Time magazine. Kamala Harris wasn't the border czar. Here's what she did. New York Times. Arizona Central. Borders are or not. Kamala Harris ran from her job to get the border. Reuters.
Right.
Republicans call Harris a failed border czar. The facts tell a different story. I mean, the left-wing media their story was Kamala was never the border czar, which was obviously false because you could go back a year and a half and find these same publications saying she was the border czar.
She was not the border czar. She was the vice president of the United States.
There's no responsibility for the border, and it was reported in all the major news media, including New York Times, CNN.
There's no such thing as the border czar. There's not a cabinet-level position called the border czar. She was the vice president of the United States, and she had multiple responsibilities that she took on as the vice president of the United States. This is one of the problems that I have with our media, is they do not do proper fact checking. They do not present the facts. They present these ridiculous sound bites that do not provide the context and the detail required for people to understand the responsibilities of our people in government. It's just drives me up the wall. These people in the media are supposed to be our voice. They're supposed to be the ones that are speaking truth to power. They're supposed to be peeling back the lies. And they're failing at it every single day.
Oh, I completely agree with you on that one. But the fact is that the same media reported she was the border czar 3 years ago.
But what does that mean, Bob? I mean, she has no authority to change policy or law on the border.
She was sent to fix the border. That's what the media was reporting.
What does that mean?
What
authority does she have to do that? Right.
She has no responsibility over the Department of Homeland Security.
Debate in Congress about it.
Over ICE. It's not her area. She has no authority to make change. She's a diplomat.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing, right? Is the truth is the administration didn't really want to fix it. They didn't. They wanted to present her as she's going to fix it or we're doing something about it, when in reality they weren't doing anything about it, because it's quite obvious that the average American citizen, more than half of them anyway, want the border fixed. They want the problem solved. The reality is it's not something the politicians want to address. And there it is.
As someone who lives in a border state, and we have a border that is routinely crossed, I'm going to have to call bullshit on that.
Tony, you don't think each party plays that issue?
They do, and that's part of the problem. Is they use it as a club to beat each other over the head with, right? As opposed to understanding that this is a real world issue, that there are real people involved, and that we have to come up with solutions that address the real world problem. It's great to have a talking point that, our borders are insecure. Well, okay. Did you know that more people enter the United States illegally through coming into the country on a plane than crossing the border?
Oh, that's
no. I mean,
that can't be true, Tony.
It doesn't. No, that doesn't surprise me at all. It happens. That happens all the time, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't deport them. They're here illegally.
I'm not saying we should not deport them. I'm
getting the facts, right?
Yeah. All I care about is that people understand the larger issue. People don't understand the larger issue, that the illegal immigration issue is not just a matter of border security.
Right.
There's a much larger issue that the garbage just floating out there about mass deportations, that happens, it's going to destroy our economy. They always talk about
I don't disagree with that either. I think you're right. It'll definitely harm the economy. That said, if you continue to allow unfettered people pouring over the border, more people are going to get killed. More people are going to lose jobs. More people are going to have wages that continue to fall. And housing values are going to continue to rise, and rent's going to continue to rise, which hurts the people in our country that are the least fortunate.
What jobs are being lost? I'm curious about that.
Definitely construction jobs.
Again, someone who lives in a border state and has just a ton of construction going on around them. I can tell you, listening to the music, that the vast majority of them are people from Mexico. There's not many gringos, swinging a hammer and knocking nails into roofs because they don't want to take those jobs.
Well, no, that's not true.
Well, we need more houses built.
I've got family.
Need more people building houses.
I've got multiple members of my family and friends of theirs that I know, grew up with, that are white, that used to be in construction. They're retired now, right? And they still are in construction as management, or they're retired. Some of them are still in construction as management. That made a good living, both in ironwork, both in carpentry, other fields. Nowadays, I mean, just my neighborhood's still only 2/3 built. And 96%, I'm going to say, percent of the contractors, 100% of the contractors that are lower level can't speak a word of English. I'm exaggerating there. They can't speak a sentence of English. And that's what's happening, right? Because they'll work for $13, $14 an hour. You don't have to pay $25, $30 an hour for a construction worker in today's wages if you're paying these illegals, right? The wages would be higher. American wages would be higher. It would mean more tax revenue for the government. It would mean more money for kind of the lower class of individual that maybe, the trade worker, I should say, not necessarily a lower class, but the trade worker in the country that's an American citizen, no matter their race. Instead, you got people pouring over the border, putting up these houses, everything else. Good portion of that money gets sent back to their home country. And it depresses wages in the country, right? So yeah, my house is cheaper maybe, right? But somebody else can't afford a house.
Okay, there's a couple of pieces there I want to deconstruct. One of which is, if there were Americans that were willing to take those jobs, they would take those jobs. But they don't want to pay. They don't want to work for what's being paid. They don't want to do that hard labor for the $14 an hour. Exactly. Yeah, they don't want to do it. Number two, the comment on taxation.
You would. But what would you do it for? I mean, if somebody paid you $100 an hour, or let's say $200 an hour, would you do a construction job?
Probably.
Right.
If someone wants to pay me a ridiculous amount of money, yeah, sure. I will give up my gig in IT to go do that.
If you can't get a worker to do it, you got to raise the wages, and that's as simple as that. There's a point. If you don't have people pouring over the border taking jobs for $13 an hour, you have to raise the wages. And yes, that'll make things more expensive, but it's a fair market rather than a market that's defined by an illegal influx or surplus of labor. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I'm just struggling to see the connection on that point. You're kind of making the point. These people are coming up here and doing jobs that American won't for a dollar value that, again, most Americans just put their nose in the air at and say, I'm not going to work for that. And then when we go back again to the tax issue, those people pay a lot of taxes and get zero benefit out of it. They are paying the payroll tax. They are paying the healthcare tax because they're not all getting paid under the table. The vast majority of them are getting paid through a paycheck, and the employers are taking the appropriate taxes out. Those get sent to the federal government and go into the coffers. Now, what's really interesting about
I
that
agree,
particular
but tax
money,
on $25 an hour or $50 an hour is a lot more than tax on $13 an hour.
I don't disagree. I do not disagree with that at all. Completely agree with what you're saying. But where are the white people willing to go and do these jobs for that much money?
I'm saying the wages are naturally going to go up if there's nobody to fill the position. I would say the story of growth in this country, being an economist myself, you need immigration. You need lots of immigration. You need young workers. You need people that are going to take the lower wage jobs. And the people
I agree with that as well.
So, and
Legal,
the fact that
please.
we have a housing shortage in this country. So I don't think it's a matter of them taking jobs that Americans would normally do. I think generally, Americans now view themselves as, everyone wants to make so much money, right?
Again, Americans normally did them until we had this illegal immigration issue.
I think it's always been new labor immigration from the building the railroads to you name it, all those low level hard labor jobs have always been done by immigrants. I think we need to put a cap on this. Obviously we need to reform our whole immigration policy. We've talked about it before. The question is, in this campaign, it probably was the number one, if not number two issue in the campaign, and there was no real discussion on what we're talking about now, like how much immigration is the media didn't do any of that. It was black and white. It was he's saying this, she's saying that. There was no talk about how to solve the issue, and that's just a failure on everyone's part, right? Well, nobody was putting forth real policies to change this.
And the earlier comment about substance within the campaign, I completely agree, but that went both ways, because here's one campaign doing nothing.
But once I got punished for it, and the other side didn't.
Yeah.
That's right. It was okay. He didn't. What did he put forth?
I have a concept of a plan,
and then they would say, "Well, she didn't provide any detail. She's not putting forth things." And he didn't put forth anything.
Yeah, I'm going to deport 30 million people. That's almost 1 in 10 people in the United States. How exactly is that going to work? How exactly is that much? How much is that going to cost?
Well, first of all, it's not going to happen.
Well, right. We know that.
Yeah, first of all, it's not going to happen.
So he was given a pass on just blatantly.
But I'll bet you it'll cost less than the welfare we're paying to these people.
They don't get welfare.
They're putting them up in hotels in New York and Chicago. There's multiple hotels in New York City right now full of illegal immigrants, and New York City's paying for it. And the feds are funding New York on the backside for one mechanism or another, or 10.
Again,
it's happening.
Again, I really wish the media would do their job and dig into this stuff, because there's so much obvious misinformation out there, and almost disinformation, that is just so easy to see through. It's mind-numbing that our media no longer does their job. They're a profit center, I get that, but good God, there's got to be people out there that will pay to watch some good journalism. Because what is happening in this country right now from our media is an absolute embarrassment.
Amen. I agree with you.
So
we need to go back to those days.
Let me ask you, Tony, given that she got in late, some of it is that she had 90 days, right?
Yep.
Was that enough time?
I think so.
I do too. I don't think time was necessary. Some people said she might have been better off if she had less time.
Yeah, no. To me, 90 days is more than enough to get a message out there. Other countries complete election cycles in less than 90 days, and I'm talking start to finish. In Canada, they will call an election and they will have that thing done in 90 days. And that includes getting the whole mechanism going, getting everybody, all the advertising going, the whole ball of wax. So if a candidate cannot get their message out to the electorate in that 90-day period, that is either a condemnation of our system, our media, or the intelligence of our elective. to me, in this particular cycle, and why Harris failed so badly was, Trump was ceded control of the narrative, and the media just
Oh yeah,
absolutely refused to push back. And I,
but
I, I believe that's because Trump is great for the media, and outrage and mayhem sells.
but she outspent him by multiples, right? On traditional media, right? She spent, I think, $2 billion plus. Somehow she's in debt. The campaign's in debt. It was an astronomical amount that she brought in and spent within that 90-day period. So blaming the media is part of it, but there was a big issue with what they were saying and when they were spending this $2 billion and how they spent it.
Well, since
I mean,
the
do you
since
disagree with that, or?
well, I view it a little bit differently, and since the election of Obama, we have found that the ad spend does not align with election success.
And so why is that, I guess?
Well, there are other and more efficient ways of getting your message out.
Yep.
Social media and alternative media
Yep.
become the secret sauce, as most people now get their information from their social media feed. When people
And why did she miss that? I mean, from podcasts to memes to
I don't think she
whatever.
missed it. There were social media influencers out there saying Kamala offered me this much money and I turned her down. That could be fake, I guess. But there were multiple Black or African American individuals out there who said, hey, this campaign offered me money to say nice things. And I said, no.
But she didn't go on all the podcasts like he did.
She went on different podcasts. She went on friendly podcasts. A couple podcasts I can't recall right now because I never listened to them. Honestly, I don't listen to Joe Rogan either, but he's obviously one of the more popular guys. She should have been on Joe Rogan.
Well, Joe Rogan was one of those tech bros pro-Trump podcasts, so I could understand why she would stay away from that one. She did go on one podcast that was traditionally viewed as extremely conservative and for young white voters. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it raised quite a few eyebrows. I think that they just did not understand the power of new media. They didn't understand the demographics that they needed to chase in this election, because it was younger white men that ultimately swung this. Again, women did not show up and cast their votes. So I think those two particular dynamics are what swung it for Trump. Trump did an exceptionally good job at communicating to these young men that have that feel a sense of hopelessness, looking at the direction the economy is going, and especially how demographics in the country are shifting. We're moving away from a white majority to a white minority, and that is terrifying.
She lost a lot of Black voters and Black males as well. She actually lost some of the Latino voters.
That's the thing. He grew his base along those different areas.
She didn't flip a single county, and she might be the first candidate in history to never flip a county.
Yep.
In the country.
Yep. No, the numbers were quite shocking. And like I said before we started recording, I picked Trump 302. I thought that was going to be the number, and I thought he was going to do exceptionally well. I didn't think he was going to do as well as he did in a number of counties across the country. And I'm talking some of the big counties that were swing counties.
Like even Cook County, Illinois, right? Or New York City.
And the reason for that is because his comments about the economy and trying to curb inflation really resonated with voters. Exit poll after exit poll after exit poll said that was the big issue. And that's what swayed voters to go in that direction. They trusted Trump more on the economy and trying to curb inflation than anything. And again, to me, that's just indicative of people not understanding what he was saying on the campaign trail, the promises he was making, and how that would ultimately impact the economy moving forward.
Right. And the note, liked what he was saying, right? The experts say, between tariffs and some of his other policies, his restriction of trade, they're all going to result in poor performance of the economy.
Yeah, no
And-
economists liked either.
And the economy has been hot. They were predicting a recession during the Biden administration for all 4 years.
Interesting.
The fact that they couldn't sell that inflation is down. On our last podcast, I said I've traveled around the world, in the last couple of years. Every place is dealing with the same issues and worse as far as inflation, housing costs. I think we're in better shape than most of the free world.
I'm not so sure about Japan and India.
I think we're in better shape than our economy's in better shape. And the fact that that Biden couldn't, or Kamala couldn't get any traction on the factual basis of where the economy was and allowed him to take control of that is beyond me. I don't understand it.
Well, here's an interesting statistic that has come up since the election. Prior to the election, people were not positive about the economy. They felt horrible about the economy. But since the election of Trump, that has changed 180 degrees. People are
he's
now
just a better marketer. Right?
Exactly.
Here's the thing for me.
Damn thing has
And
changed.
here's why I feel better about the economy is because, and I'm being honest here, I think inflation's coming back. He's going to spend.
Left.
Well, no, it hasn't left.
No,
Obviously, it hasn't
down,
left.
but
You're going to have some tariffs, right? Even if they're not to the extent of what's being presented right now, you're going to have some tariffs. You're going to have continued spending. I'll be shocked if the government cutting actually happens. I hope it does, but I'll be shocked. I think inflation's going to increase a little bit, and I think if you're a guy with money in the stock market or in real estate, you're going to be okay. And you can probably feel that already, assuming both of you guys have stocks, right? Equities. So same thing's kind of happening in crypto right now. And, crypto's generally owned by people who will take that money and spend it, whether it's on more crypto or something else. So businesses. So but that said, sooner or later, this party's going to end. And the spending needs to stop.
And it's going to end ugly.
Yeah. I mean,
bring on the mouth, boys, because there's people puking all over the place. It's going to be ugly.
Exactly. But there's one guy at the party looking like he's having a good time, and he's not intoxicated at all. And he's going to be the one guy kind of standing back, and he's going to do okay because he's going to know when to, stop. Somebody's going to get rich off of it, and it's most likely, again, politicians.
Well, do you think it's going to end under Trump's watch?
We're due for a recession. I think it's going to happen whether it's under Trump or not. I think it's going to probably happen towards maybe year 3, late year 2. But I don't know. I hope Doge, Elon, and Ramaswamy have a real effect and cut spending.
Oh.
But. Well, I mean, I don't think it's going to happen. I honestly don't believe it's going to happen. We can go into detail on why. I don't blame the individuals as much as I blame the government.
The Department of Government Efficiency.
Yep.
Oh man, if you want to point to the swamp,
irony,
that is it, baby. You're
gonna cut government spending by adding another government organization.
And people that don't understand how government works. That's the thing that kills me. When I look at the selections for the cabinet, each one, like I've had to start wearing a hockey helmet because every time I see a new cabinet appointee, I beat my head against my desk. I'm just like, really? Can I not find anybody who has actual experience and expertise in this area?
I like Tulsi Gabbard a lot.
He likes Tulsi.
I've always liked Tulsi. I like RFK. I really do. And I don't think we've got the food thing on the agenda, but you have got to admit, like the additives in this country, pretty much every other country in the world doesn't allow the additives that we add.
Our food is
right.
Crap. It's
ton of it's petroleum based. You've got coloring that's petroleum based that has no nutritional value whatsoever.
Yep.
If this stuff is like, it's got to stop. It doesn't have to stop. It would just be good for people, generally speaking, if it stopped.
Preach on, sister. We're on the same page here.
You want somebody competent to reform that system, or somebody completely outside, unqualified to reform that system?
Okay, so I don't know. I'm going to say the mid 70s is when a lot of this really unhealthy stuff started entering our food system, right? Maybe it was before then. It might have been in the 50s or around World War II, late 40s. But so who since then has stopped it? Has it stopped? Has it slowed down, or has it gotten worse?
Well, they tried. They actually made an effort to put in play some level of oversight and some level of controls over our food supply. They put together the FDA,
Right.
and unfortunately, what happened is deregulation. And the regulators that were left in the FDA to oversee this type of thing are people from within the industry itself.
You hit it on the head right there.
Capture of all of it.
So do you think RFK is going to do? Do you think RFK is going to do worse?
What's he going to do?
He's passionate, right? So
capture. How is he possibly going to get anything done?
Well, you've got Chevron, right? So technically, based on Supreme Court ruling, the FDA, all those regulations are garbage until Congress actually approves them, right? So what I would like to see happen is RFK say, see evidence, this is bad for you, this is bad for you, this is bad for you, and this stuff over here we're not sure about. And here's the evidence that these countries have banned all this stuff, and they're healthier, they have less cancer, they've got less strokes, whatever. I'd like to just, first thing, let's put that evidence out there to the public. Second thing, it would be like, regulation is going to end now because of this.
And you don't think
And because of Chevron, it enables that, because if these were not congressionally approved regulations, they can get struck down. That's what I like to think.
Yeah.
No, that's not how government works, Tony. That's what you said earlier. I understand that. Let's get closer.
Oh, I agree. We have to bring people in that know what the heck they're doing, and then put in place thoughtful regulation, things that actually make sense and address real world issues. Some of the regulation has been put in play. Number one, you don't let lawyers write regulation because they make it too complex, and for some reason they always leave lots of loopholes. So we need to get back to having some actual common sense regulation, and I think get people in those particular departments that understand what the heck they're doing. The FDA is a very important body within the government because it does regulate our food supply, just like the Department of Education is exceptionally important because it establishes a standard that all states need to meet so we all can agree on the same facts. That's where regulation comes into play and how regulation becomes thoughtful and it works.
We know that these organizations are failing us, right? So it comes down to
nobody's arguing with that.
Yeah.
But do you put somebody who's after the destruction of these institutions, which I would argue most of his appointees appear to be, or do you put somebody in place that's competent that can reform them? That's the only question. Go
back 50 years, maybe 100. It's gotten worse. So would you consider the last 100 years of people competent?
Money in politics.
Or people that you didn't even know? I mean, who did Obama appoint head of the FDA or Health and Human Services? Do you even remember?
What they're going to find out is this is much more complex than you've ever dreamed about. It's not as simple as you believe it to be. And they're going to be fought by industry every step of the way if he tries to change anything.
You're absolutely right. I don't argue that. We need to fight to get more simple. And I've said this for years, and I know it's not this simple, but it should be. Like, bills in Congress should be one page.
But if he really wanted to fight the swamp,
regulation should be one page.
Why isn't he talking about getting rid of lobbying? Why isn't he talking about any of the political reforms that really will drive change, Bob?
Yeah, because they
none of that's talking about. Yeah, they fund his campaign. And so what do you think is going to happen?
I've probably said this on this podcast more times than not. You want to solve the illegal immigration problem? You find a business, $100,000 per head per day for every illegal that you hire. That solves the problem real quick because no illegals have jobs anymore and they go back to where they came from. That would solve the problem. That's all you need to do.
It's a show, Bob.
It's a show.
Okay. It's a show. And I'd rather
so if it's a show, if it's a show, they're both incompetent and they're both actors. It's theater. All of Congress is theater. Look at Congress. Tell me is there any congressman? I'd guess there's maybe 5% of the congressmen that exist that it's not theater.
But we vote them in every year, right?
It's theater. It's all theater. And when you look at it that way, you realize that everything's pointless. All this arguing over politics is pointless.
It really kind of is. I agree with pretty well everything you've said in the last 5 minutes. Our regulators suck. Our regulations suck. Our representatives suck. Everything that we have going on in Washington right now is a joke. But it has only got worse. It has not got better. And we have to get better at this. Otherwise, we as a nation will continue to fall further and further behind the rest of the world.
And would you say ultimately is that why we brought Trump back to be president? Because everyone thinks he's going to solve that, or at least
he sold himself as being able to solve that the best. People are dissatisfied.
See how he did it the first
term. They see him as an upsetter and outside. Well, here's the thing, too.
Maybe I was not paying attention because he did nothing of that first term.
People see the assassination attempt. I knew it. I'm telling you, he was elected the minute that his ear got hit by a bullet.
That's Bob's theory, Tony. That
he was elected that very minute.
I don't know what you think about that.
I kind of disagree with that. I think that the assassination attempt really didn't move the needle that much in the long term. In the short term, yes, there's a great outpouring of sympathy, and I think that really helped his numbers grow. I think in the long run, it really didn't help him that much. I just don't see anything that points to that moment having been a bellwether moment for him or his campaign.
What about the squirrel?
I think that was a big deal. I think it was like...
You hear about the...
Okay. Yeah, I heard about that. And if exactly, moose and squirrel. Boris and Natasha, we're out to get them. No, I heard all about the whole squirrel thing, and really, if that moved the needle, I am in deep fear for the direction this country is going.
Here's why I think it moved the needle. Well, two reasons, right? One, it sucked the air out of the room for any potential last-minute message that Kamala wanted to get across, right? Because if you went to social media, that's all you saw. Government overreach. Government killed the squirrel. Government killed the moose. They raided this guy's house. They pulled him outside. They beheaded the squirrel, right?
Kamala.
Government overreach. And then you've got Trump. You got all these memes of Trump online petting a squirrel. The squirrel's on his shoulder and the raccoon's hugging him.
We are obviously in different media circles because holy smokes, I didn't see any of that. And
all over the place. If you go on X.
Okay, there's your first mistake.
You hit just hit the trending. I mean, if you go on there right now, you can see what's trending. It tells you what people are talking about, right? And it's not tailored to you. I'm looking right now. Top trends: Bitcoin, Lakers, Isaiah Evans, Creighton. Survivor 47. I don't know what half of this stuff is, right? Fauci.
Yeah, and you couldn't pay me enough to re-register for X. I quit Twitter as soon as Musk bought it.
Obamacare's trending of all things right now. That's kind of interesting. But
yeah, the whole squirrel and raccoon bloodbath thing. to me, that speaks more negatively to the intellect of American voters than anything.
Oh, you can't say that, Tony.
Sure. I just
I'm
did.
too.
The American people are well informed and they cast their ballot.
I don't know for sure, but that was I'm 98% sure that was a state issue and not a federal issue.
Exactly. There's a state law in place that says you can't have these types of animals, and the guy went and still, had those types of animals.
Well, should be blaming Gretchen Whitmer for that. Then she should have timed it a week later. But yeah.
To me, that's to steal some parlance from my conservative friends. That was the original nothing burger.
Yeah, that created a media frenzy, at least social media frenzy. Here's the thing with the moose or the squirrel, not the moose, the squirrel and the raccoon. So the guy who owned those animals had a huge social media following.
Yep.
Showing off those animals, right? So it wasn't just a random guy. It was somebody with a huge YouTube following or other social media.
That was how the guy made his living.
They went to watch his video. Yes, That's how he made his living.
That's
and then the government came in right before the election and did that, right? So if nothing else, considering the government in Michigan is generally speaking run by the left, it shows a lack of ability to just do some basic planning.
Where was he? Was he in a rural area?
I have no idea. Somewhere in Michigan.
Yeah. Nobody bothers to find that out, right? What the actual facts of the case are.
Well, I'm not sure who called the feds on him, right? Or I mean, not the feds, the cops. The cops. I'm not sure who called the cops on him. I mean, it could have been a neighbor.
None of that's important, right?
It could have been a Republican operative, for that matter. Or somebody in some other country, for that matter, to say, hey, this guy's here, knowing that they were going to react, and then create a firestorm. I mean, who knows?
All that mattered was the raccoon was on Trump's shoulder, right?
So here's something I wanted to ask that wasn't, it's completely off topic, sort of. So the day of the election, Jill Biden, went to vote, and she was wearing all red. And she walked out, media, and waved, completely wearing red. Was that intentional? Was she sending a message? I'm asking you, Tony. I mean, you're an expert in this kind of thing. I personally kind of think that was a message. I don't think the Bidens were happy with the way they were treated, kind of kicked out, and they probably didn't get along that well with Kamala based on stories. And Kevin alluded to one of those a little earlier. Was she sending a message?
Well, that's potentially something that could have happened. Those particular people usually try and send messages with subtle messages with what they wear or the accessories they wear or the things that they say. So that's a distinct possibility. I'm not going to discount that. I can see the Bidens being very upset in the way they were treated. I think that Joe Biden did get a bit of an unfair shake in all of this. Yes, he had no rhyme or reason to run for president, but
that's what I say is the original sin.
But yeah,
him running.
But neither did Donald Trump.
No, you're absolutely right. Both of them shouldn't have been running.
Let's be realistic. Both of them were the angry grandpas that should have been out front yelling, "Get off my lawn." They should not have been anywhere near a presidential campaign. You don't run a septuagenarian or almost an octogenarian for president of the United States. Both of them are so far out of touch with reality, it's not even funny. Yet, one was completely chastised and forced to step down. And the other one, even after that performance in the debate against Harris, where he had
he clearly lost the debate, right?
Well, he completely lost his mind that night too.
Right. I'm like, okay, now she won the debate, so and then her numbers went the opposite direction.
And I really don't even care about who won the debate. What I care about was the level of cognitive function that was put on display that night. Biden had a similar performance in the first debate, and it was obvious he was not able to perform the particular function of the president of the United States. In the second debate, Trump had equally as bad a performance, but the media did not hold his feet to the fire the way they did to Biden and the Democrats. They should have roasted Trump for that performance and basically said, okay, Grandpa, time to retire. You guys need to now put forward a new standard bearer. J.D. Vance is your guy. But they didn't. They stood back and they let Trump continue to go on, ramble away, and really continue to be that angry grandpa yelling, "Get off my lawn," the rest of the campaign.
To be fair, yes, she did take him in a direction he shouldn't have gone. But B, the Republican Party knew they didn't stand a chance with anybody but Trump. No chance. And at that point, he already won the primary, right?
Yeah.
And that's the difference is Biden should have been primaried, or there should have been some sort of, at least, even if not legitimate or real, there should have been at least some show at the convention with the states arguing over who their candidate was going to be.
Yeah, I agree. When Biden decided to step down, he should have done the absolute right thing, and that was step down. He should have relinquished the office of the president of the United States to Harris as the vice president and go off into retirement. This thing of, well, I'm not going to run again and I'm going to stay in the presidency and, basically pass the campaign torch off to her, that never sat right with me. That's not the way our process is supposed to work. So, yeah, that kind of set the whole tone for the direction that the campaign was ultimately going to go. It wasn't, the messages were never well formulated. The whole strategy was never well formulated. It was poorly executed. And like I say, the only thing that worked at the DNC was the fact that they came out of it with some really positive messaging that gave not just Democrats, but independents and a lot of Republicans some idea of what hope looked like. Again, that quickly faded away into dust, but that's kind of the way that started to play out. I think if they had gone down the road of, as you said, had a proper primary, selected a candidate appropriately, it would have been possibly a different outcome. I actually think that if they had flipped the ticket, it probably would have worked out much better in the Democrats' favor.
Yeah, I agree. I
agree.
I think they had an opportunity that they missed, and as I've always said, they can mess up a one float parade.
I think they were worried about the money.
I don't know what the concern was, but I think
she couldn't take the money. Like another candidate wouldn't have had the Biden money.
But at the end of the day, as Tony pointed out, the money really doesn't move the needle. It's a prerequisite, but it's not a determining factor.
The Democrat
I agree with you there, but here's the thing, and I don't know where that money goes. But to be honest with you, that's the thing about campaigns is you can hire your cousin to be your campaign secretary, and you can hire your other cousin to be your campaign manager, and you can hire your kid to go out and canvass for you, or a head of canvassers or whatever, and you get rich, or your family gets rich off your campaign. So if you're, let's just say that $5 million of your $1 billion goes to your family, you get richer. That's why you see these people continuing to campaign knowing they don't have a chance.
Well,
right? So that money matters from the perspective of people running your campaign make money. It's a show. Again, it's theater.
There's also a reason why every member of Congress is pretty much a millionaire. They go in, not being a millionaire, but they come out being a millionaire because they raise all this money for their particular political campaign, and then when they don't spend it, they get to sit on it.
Yeah,
it's a nice rule. So did Trump do anything different than he did in any other campaign that he ran this time? I didn't see anything different. I mean, I don't think. Shot. he did manage to get shot. You're right about that, Bob.
Yeah, he put a big target on himself. No, I don't think that he really did anything different.
Right.
I just think that they managed to hit on the right media sources this time around, the most influential media sources. Beyond that, it was 2016 all over again. Trump really hit the campaign trail, played his greatest hits. His fans loved it. It was like going and seeing Journey right now. You loved him back in the 80s and early 90s. But you don't go to see them play their new stuff. You go to see them play, their greatest hits. That's basically what you wanted to see, and that's what Trump basically did.
Barron quite a bit with, hey, Dad, go to this podcast and this podcast and this podcast, because this is what matters to young men, and this is what they're listening to. It wasn't just Rogan. There were other ones. Early on in the campaign, he went to one. Guy presented him with a cyber truck with the image of Trump on there, right? An American flag and all this, and a Rolex, or I don't know if it was a Rolex, but it was definitely a fancy watch. Barron helped, I think. Barron said, hey, here's where you can kind of make a difference. And he listened, and he did it. That helped. From my perspective as a voter, I would have, Kamala didn't feel authentic to me. I don't know if you guys disagree.
Oh no, I actually didn't think she was that great a candidate.
She's not a great candidate.
She wasn't likable.
She should have gone to places and just like Joe Rogan. I know what you said about Rogan earlier, but go there, have a 3-hour conversation. The guy's not going to attack her. He's going to ask her questions. Talk like a human. Don't be a robot. Just like us three are now. Just have a conversation.
Sure,
right?
Sure, I get
That's
that.
all she needed to do. She could have kicked his ass.
Yeah,
but she couldn't.
But yeah, like I say, she's not a likable candidate. She's not really outgoing. She's more of a policy wonk. She is tough to listen to. But then again, the alternative, that's kind of like that rectal itch that won't go away with a medicated pad. I just don't understand how people did not.
How do people look past all
that? He feels authentic. He feels authentic to me, right? And I told you earlier, I don't believe for like a minute that we're actually going to cut government spending.
What is authentic?
Right? I don't believe in a lot of these things are going away.
Yeah.
Believe him.
Yeah. What is authentic about Donald Trump?
Because I believe he believes it.
He doesn't.
He doesn't believe it.
He doesn't. He's the biggest liar on the face of the planet.
He doesn't believe it.
I believe
he's a showman. He's a con man extraordinaire. I mean, I'll give him credit. He's amazing at what he does. I don't understand how people fall for it all the time.
Yeah, go talk to anybody who lived in New York during the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and they'll tell you that there was one guy that was known as the big con man in New York City. Yeah.
He used to be on Howard Stern all the time. Howard Stern turned on him because he knows who he is. He knows who the guy is. That's who he is.
Authenticity is not a word I would use to describe
Here's
Donald
the thing.
Trump.
The country also voted for him, and the country knows who Kamala was, right? So that's really what it comes down to for me. Is at this point you got A versus B. Would I like C, D, E, and F as an option? Absolutely.
See, that's
and
just
I think these states that are going to ranked choice voting, I think it's great.
I don't think we ever found out who Kamala Harris was. I thought you said that earlier, that we didn't know who Kamala Harris was. She was terrible at telling her story. Well, she never connected with the electorate, and people really didn't know who she was and what she had done.
So what we had to go off of, right, was her prosecutorial career.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And there's plenty of stories out there about her keeping people in jail past their sentences, putting people in jail for marijuana offenses, while later on she was laughing about smoking it in college, listening to, I don't know, Bob Marley or somebody. And and that's pretty much what she had. And I said that I had this argument with Kevin, or at least discussion with Kevin, about she had, prior to her most recent run against Donald Trump, the same amount of electoral votes as me.
Yeah.
She did terrible in her campaigning. Whether it was she couldn't get a message across or the country didn't trust her, I don't know. But she was terrible at speaking, and it didn't just come off as I'm a bad speaker. It came off as I'm an idiot.
You could pile on to her, but as I pointed out on our last podcast, Biden was down like 6 or 7 points in May of 2023. She's not my candidate. I don't think she ran a great campaign.
She should have been somebody else.
But it was still pretty close at the end.
So who's the next candidate going to be?
Wait, I want to talk about the closest. I want to talk about, Tony, I'm hearing, and I was just listening to Bari Weiss's podcast. She's saying she's calling it a landslide and a mandate. Historical, which is really Trump's speaking points on this election. There is no way you could characterize this election as a landslide and a mandate. He doesn't even have a majority of the vote. He's won by 1.6%. Granted, nobody expected them to win the popular vote. Nobody expected them to win all the swing states. I would point to the fact that in the Senate races, on the swing states, the Democrats took 4 of the 5 races. So the down ballot, we haven't talked about the down ballot. And I think the last House race was just determined last night. I think the Republicans have maybe a 3-seat majority in the House. So to think that this was some type of landslide victory, I mean, where does that messaging come from, and why am I hearing it all over the place? It's that you repeat it and you repeat it again, and he said it the night of the election is a historic win, and we're going to run the table type of thing. And I'm like, where does this come from? The numbers just don't equal that.
They don't. The numbers don't equal that, but the perception, and perception is reality.
Right.
The perception is because one party has complete control over all the mechanisms of government. It is a mandate. Hey, they hold the executive, they hold the legislative, and they definitely hold the judicial. Okay, those are all the mechanisms of government. The next 2 years is going to be really interesting because they have all the mechanisms of power. There is going to be no way that the Democrats can go and challenge anything and take it to the Supreme Court and think it's going to be overturned because the court is stacked. So what we're going to see is 2 years of Heritage Foundation policy put into play and a reshaping of government in ways that are not only unconstitutional, but beyond the norms established in non-political government operations and civil service.
But at the end of the day, everything's going to be fine, right?
Oh yeah.
That's Bob's message to us.
Everything's going to be fine.
I'm saying it might be. I wouldn't put my bet on
the Republic is not going to fall.
No,
we're going to challenge our institutions.
And if it does, it's going to be like a 20-year war.
And on that depressing note, we'll conclude part 1 of our discussion with Dr. Tony. We'll be dropping part 2 in about a week or so. But as always, thanks for listening and have a great day.